Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset necessary so you as chiropractors can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about the importance of being different and why being different and not better is going to help you grow your practice, increase your impact, and increase your income too. Now, as a world, we've become obsessed with better, and many of us, understandably, have wrongly bought into the idea that the path to us growing our practice, our impact, and our income is for us to get better. Now, as a result of this, we want to make better videos. We want to get better at our new patient consultations. We want to get better at our reporter findings. We want to get better at the care that we deliver. Now, I totally understand the desire to want to serve our patients better, and I want to encourage you to continue to do that. By no means do I want you to see this episode today as an excuse for you delivering poor care at all. And there's something incredibly romantic about the idea that the chiropractic practice that is the best that'll be the one that is the most successful. And time and time again on this podcast, I have given examples of businesses that were inferior to their competitors, and yet they were the most successful because they were different or they marketed themselves better. But today, particularly, we're going to focus on the power of being different. So I want you to stop for a moment, and I want you to think about the companies that over the last 10 or 20 years that have really exploded, that have now become household names. And I want you to think about, what have they done? Have they focused on being better, or have they been completely different? So let's think about Netflix, for instance, which didn't exist 10 years ago as well. Netflix is not just a better Blockbuster. For those of you that remember what Blockbuster is, that's that place we used to go to rent our DVDs. Netflix is different. It was a brand new idea that didn't exist beforehand. Tesla, these electric cars, they're not just a better car. It's a completely new and different model. So different, in fact, that if you want to go along and buy a Tesla, even if I want to go along and buy a Mercedes-Benz, I go down to the showroom and I look around at the cars. But with Tesla, you make an appointment in the same way you might make an appointment to go and see your favorite chiropractor as well. Amazon is not just a better, more convenient bookshop. It's completely different. Everything went online, and different in the way that they pioneered the one-click purchase. So this was a whole new and different model. And once they got the different in around that set from the books, remember when Amazon used to be just books? I'd forgotten for a little while that that's what it used to be, because it's kind of everything now. But it's a completely new and different, because often new is that same word. You're going to hear me use those interchangeably today, the words new and different. And then Apple. I often talk about Apple. In fact, for a long time, Apple's entire marketing slogan was think different. Now, Apple doesn't spend a lot of time comparing their products with others because they're different. And there is great debate about whether the processing power of Apple computers is actually better than others. But it's because they spend so much time focusing on different, we tend not to have a comparison. We're going to talk about why different is so powerful in a couple of moments. Now, despite all of these examples and common household examples, and you can probably think of several other businesses that have now become household names over the last 2 decades as well, when I sit with a group of chiropractors and we're masterminding how to grow our practice, the focus continues to be around how do I get better and not how do I be different. Now, what I want you to start to think about is stop trying to be better than the other chiropractors in your community, other health practitioners in your community. I want you to start to think about, how can you be different from them? So why is it that different is so damn powerful? Now, different by its very definition is rare. Now, I want to share with you an Og Mandino quote here. This is from the world's greatest salesman. He says, "I am rare and there is value in rarity. Therefore, I'm valuable." Okay. So by its very definition, when you're different, you become rare, and we value things that are rare. Now, when you're different also, you get put into a category of one, because we can't compare you with anything else. And so you're now in a category of one. Now, this has a whole bunch of benefits, one of which I've spoken about before on the podcast is with regards to pricing. Now, if I can't compare your chiropractic practice to any other chiropractic practice or any other health practice, then I can no longer compare the fact that your adjustment is $75 and everybody else's is $50 because you're different as well. So different is very important and very powerful from a profitability and from a pricing point of view. Different is also really strongly associated with leadership because, as I said before, that when you're different, you end up in a category of one and automatically that makes you the leader. Now, when we're wanting to do business with companies, with products, with services, most people would rather work with the leaders. That's something inside of us that we want to do. We want to work with the leaders. We want to be associated with the leaders. So when you are different from the other practitioners, the other businesses in your community, more people will want to work with you. Different helps you to stand out and capture attention, okay? So many of us have developed really quite a sophisticated advertising blindness. We just don't see stuff that is going on because we are exposed to so many advertising messages. In fact, Seth Godin wrote an entire book about this called Purple Cow. And his contention is that as we're driving along the country roads, we don't notice the cows that are the left and the right of us because they've always been there and they always look the same. However, if there was a purple cow that was there, we'd notice it immediately and we'd probably pull the car over to take a look at it. So when we are different, we stand out. Seth Godin would say that he'd want us to be the purple cow. So let me ask you some questions. Let's start to have a think about things. What are you doing to help your practice stand out? What are you doing online? Does your website look any different from the other chiropractor's website? Most of us, when we want to develop a new website, what we do is we have a look around at what the other websites, the other chiropractors' websites look like. And then we either go to a company that makes lots of chiropractors' websites, and so they make the same thing. Crazy. Once you start to understand the importance of difference here, you'll see how mad this is. Or what we do is we give an example of a lot of other chiropractors' websites that we like, and we give that to our web designer, and we'll say, here, do this. In essence, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting our website to be exactly the same as all the other chiropractors' websites, but maybe just a little bit different. What are you doing in your practice that's different? Again, what we do when we want to grow our practice is we find out what is working for other chiropractors. We become a part of coaching groups, and then we want to do the same as everybody else is doing. What are you doing in your community with your community outreach and how you're showing up in your community that is different? Now, when I ask this question and I have these discussions with community influencer members or other chiropractors out and around at seminars that I'm running or interviews that I'm being on, most of us can't think of anything that we're doing differently, okay? So the words different and stand out, again, I'm going to use those back and forwards as well. So, another way for me to ask that question is, what are you doing differently online? What are you doing differently on the social media platforms? What are you doing differently in practice and in your community? Now, there are challenges with being different, okay? And this is what starts to come up because you're probably starting to think, okay, I like the idea of being different. I can see how it's worked for these other businesses and I think it might work with me. But here's the thing. Along with being different also comes the risk of failure, of rejection, and maybe even, humiliation as well. So that's what stops a lot of us from putting ourselves out there because we love the idea of different, but we don't want to risk any of that. So how do we deal with that? Well, I think in order to deal with some of the challenges and the courage that's needed to be different, let's pivot for a moment. I want to ask you a question, okay? I want you to think about a person that you've really helped, that you've made a significant difference to their lives. And I'll give you an example of one that comes to mind for me. And when I'm talking about this, I like to give this example for several reasons. I'm not going to call this person by their real name because I haven't asked their permission to share their story. So I'll call her Betty, okay? Betty came to see me with sciatica, okay? Now, often when we think about, success stories that we've had as chiropractors, we like to tell the miracle stories of the people whose asthma went away, digestive problems go away. And often for some reason, we don't appreciate the musculoskeletal cases that we've helped. So this is why I'm going to give you this example here and you'll see why. So as I mentioned beforehand, Betty came to see me because of sciatica. It's so hard for me to call her Betty. But anyway, I'll keep on going on with that as well. And she was an airline hostess and hadn't been able to work the years previously because her sciatica was so bad. She did the long haul flights from Australia over to US and UK, and getting in those small confined spaces and being able to kind of lean across and serve people. The pain was just so horrific that she really wasn't working at all. So after a little while of seeing me, like many of the cases that we see, her back started to feel better and her sciatica went away, and slowly she went back to work part-time, and then she went back to work full-time again. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but I would often fly on the airline that she worked at, and she would often say to me, if you're ever flying, let me know, I'll make sure that you get looked after. And I did. I often got upgraded and all those kind of things. But here was the amazing thing about this story that I want to share with you now. When I would hop on the plane, and people would recognize me straight away from their name, they would check off, or the host, the staff would come up to me, and they would often say, oh, you're Angus, you're the man that saved Betty's life. And I would be like, no, I didn't. I would think in my mind, I didn't save her life. I helped her with her back and her sciatica. But after hearing this numerous times, I started to think about what the care that I had delivered for Betty, what it had meant for her. It had meant that she was able to go back to a job that she loved. It gave her independence, it gave her travel, and it gave her a community again. And that for Betty was literally saving her life. Helping her get rid of her back pain and her sciatica saved her life. And to me, what I started to realize is that that was as valuable as any condition that could have changed in her life, whether it been asthma or cancer or any of those kind of things. So when we help people, many times chiropractors will minimize, oh no, I just help people with headaches. Or many times helping somebody with their headaches changes their lives, saves their lives. So I want you to think about now, who is somebody that you've had a profound impact on their life? Who is that person? And what would their life have been like had you not had come into it? How would not only maybe their life have changed, but maybe their family life? I know that as a result of the work that I did, it really changed Betty's relationship with her family, with her husband as well, because she wasn't stuck at home with him. She was able to go off. She had her independence as well. That helped her financially, helped the family financially as well. But every aspect of Betty's life changed because of the work that I did. So being different takes courage. Now, the interesting thing about courage, and the reason that I wanted you to identify that person there too, is that as human beings, we will very often do things to help another that we would never do for ourselves, which is why we hear these stories of amazing bravery where an individual runs into a burning building to save another. You know, we see people get inside burning cars or put themselves in extreme danger to make a difference to the life of another. When courage is needed, instead of thinking about ourselves, if we think about the difference we can make to another, that's very often all that's needed to help us move forwards. So my contention is, in your community and in my community as well, there are thousands of Bettys, or whoever the person was that you thought about as I asked you that question, that are wanting your help, that are wanting you to stand out, that at a moment as they look across their community, whether it be online or out in their community, there is a sea of greyness, all the businesses looking the same. And so they can't find you and they can't find me. And what they're needing of us is they're needing for us to be that purple cow. They're needing for us to be different. Let me give you another example that I want to show you, because motivation, in essence, what we do is we do things that are important to us. So if you're finding there's areas in your life that you're not taking action on, then quite simply, I'm going to say this: it's not important to you, or it's not important enough. This is a thought experiment that I like to give called two towers. I want you to imagine that there are two very, very tall towers. They reach some 300 or 400 meters up into the sky. And in between these two towers is a wooden plank. The wooden plank is 25 meters in between the towers, and the wooden plank is about 0.5 meter wide. Okay, now it's wide enough that we're on the ground, and I wanted you to go across this 25 meters. You could run across it. In fact, you could sprint across it without even thinking twice about it. But the very fact that we're now 400 meters up into the air, our brain starts to play tricks on us. We start to think about what would happen if we would fall. And in fact, if at that height and you were to fall, then there's no way that you would survive it. And in fact, in this thought experiment, I want to let you know that only 1 out of every 2 people is able to get across. So you've got a 50% success chance of getting across the other side. Now let's up the stakes a little bit. And then if you get across to the other side of the tower, I want you to think about this, that there's $1 million there for you, okay? Would you walk it? With a 1 in 2 chance of getting across, with a prize of $1 million, would you do it? Now, when I ask this question to a group of people, invariably there is about 20% of people will raise their hand, but 80% of people won't raise their hand. And even when I up the stakes a little bit, because $1 million is a lot of money, but for many of you, it might not change your life. For some of you, it absolutely would. This is how lucky many of us are that are listening to this podcast, but maybe not enough to risk a 1 in 2 chance of death. But if I shifted that up to $100 million, that might be generational change as well. That could make a significant difference to you and a lot of people that you love and a lot of charities around you as well. And I asked that same question, would you be prepared to walk across there now if there was a 1 in 2 chance? And instead of perhaps 20%, maybe I can get 30 or even 40% of people to raise their hand. That's enough for them to really risk that as well. But I can make one subtle change here, and I can get 100% of people to raise their hand. And by getting rid of the $100 million, what I then do is I say, now, instead of there being $100 million there, I want you to think about the person that's most important to you in your life. Is it your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister? Is it your child? Is it your husband? Is it your wife? And now they're sitting over on the other tower, and their safety requires for you to get across there. How many of you would walk now? And 100% of people in the audience raise their hand immediately. I share that story with you now, and if you think about putting yourself into that, that shows you the power of meaning for us to motivate ourselves, for us to build up a sense of courage. We do things that are important to ourselves. The reason I wanted you to identify that person beforehand, the Betty in my case there, is because the difficult things that we'll need to do, the changes that you will need to go through, the risk of failure, of rejection, and maybe even humiliation, you will do those when you understand that there are thousands of Bettys out there. For many of us, the motivation of just increased income in our practice is not enough. But when we think about the lives that we can change, then we absolutely will take those steps forwards when we think about the person that's out there. So, now that you're perhaps starting to develop some of the courage to be different, perhaps you're thinking to yourself, I don't know how to be different, Angus. So I want to share some as we start to wind this episode up. Let's get practical now. We've gone through the headspace side of things. Let's get practical in the idea of here's some thoughts that will help you find your difference as well. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to start speaking with your patients, your existing patients. Speak to them in person, and maybe the front desk person could start doing this for you. Your CAs could start having this conversation, and you should be emailing your patients as well, and maybe even putting some things out on the socials. And you should be asking them, look, I'm doing some experiments at the moment, or I'm doing some thoughts in around our practice, and I'm wanting to know what is different about what we do. Why do you continue to come back and see us time and time again? What is different? And I want you to look at what answers they come back with. And I want you to look at these, perhaps a few different groups, because it's interesting to get answers from the people who have just started to come and see you, maybe within the first 3 months, those that have been seeing you for 12 months or longer, and those long-term patients. What are the key areas that they are saying are different about what you do that drives them to continue to see you? Find out what's in common with these things, and then you need to start to double down on these, start to articulate these things. Have this be key what's written across your website, with how you're showing up in your community, with the things that you're sharing on your social media platforms. Your patients, your existing community will tell you what is different about what you do as well. Now, here's the other interesting thing. Your difference doesn't have to be revolutionary, okay? It doesn't have to be as big a deal as inventing a brand new category like Netflix as well. It can be something subtle. Now, I had an aha moment with this last week. I was watching, I must have been watching the football on television, Aussie Rules football here. And every time they went to an ad break, Apple was advertising their new phone, okay? Now, they had a release just recently come out about the iPhone 13 as well, and the update. Now, I want you to think of the enormity. Like when Apple has this release, for starters, there is a build-up of excitement to it weeks out in advance. They broadcast this live to the world. People queue up for tickets. It's such a big deal if you can actually be at this event live there. And then for days afterwards, tech bloggers are, writing back and forwards about the new thing that's been released. Now, for those of you that are aware from this, The big event that came on, there was many different things, but the big change to the iPhone 13, the big new and different was this. It's green now. You can get a green one. Now they are these ads that were in primetime television and between the football here and across buses, and you'll see them advertised everywhere. The only thing that is different about this phone is it now comes in green. Now this, Apple and their marketers are brilliant, okay? This is enough. The fact that their phone is now green is enough for them to make a huge big deal of and tell their communities that this is different. You're looking for a brand new category like Netflix, when in actual fact, the different that you should be sharing with people just on your social media is, hey, we've got a new adjusting table in. Hey, we've got this new supplement. Hey, we've just changed the way that the fish oils that we have, they're now enteric coated. We can make a big deal out of almost anything. I've just done a new seminar on the weekend. Different doesn't have to be revolutionary, okay? Different can be as subtle and as simple as a green iPhone as well. Now, here's the next thing where things get crazy, because your different doesn't even have to be different from what the other practitioners, the other chiropractors, and the other businesses are doing. Now, that might sound like a bit of an oxymoron, saying that my difference doesn't even have to be different. Let me give you an example, okay? In the early 1900s, Schlitz beer, it's hard to say that, okay? Schlitz beer was in trouble, okay? That sales were declining. The business was in real risk of going under. At the time, it had plummeted down to 15th in its beer sales. So the Schlitz Brewing Group decided to engage legendary advertiser, a guy by the name of Claude Hopkins. Okay, he was the guru of advertising at the time. Now, Claude, whenever he started to work with any company, he used to love to dive deep. He wanted to know, if he was working for a car company, he wanted to know exactly how the car was made and where did the materials were coming from and all those kind of things. He was looking for what was different. So Claude goes down to the brewery and he has the brewery staff from Schlitz Beers showing him around, and they're taking him through the entire brewing process until they finally come to the filtering room. And the guy is showing him through and he says, this is filtering stage number 1 where we do this, and this is filtering stage after we've done that and we've removed the impurities here. This is what allows a crisp and clean tasting beer. We then do it again, which gives us an even more crisp and cleaner taste as well. And at that moment there, Hopkins stops and he says, my God, he says, why are you not telling the world that you are twice filtering your beer and that's what gives that super clean and crisp taste? And then the brewer then says to him, this is what everybody does. Everybody twice filters their beer. It's normal practice as well. All companies brew their beer the same way. Now, Hopkins at this stage counted and he said, yes, absolutely. He said, but nobody is telling the world that you're doing it. He says, you need to be the first one to tell the public about this process. And he says, you'll gain an enormous advantage. Hopkins went on to create an advertising campaign based all around twice filtered beer. Now, the result, within 6 months, this beer went to the number 1 selling beer in the whole of the USA. Now, here's the interesting thing. There are things that you are doing, that every chiropractor in your town is doing, and maybe every chiropractor around the world is doing, but none of us are telling our community that's what we're doing. When you get the feedback back from your patients, when they tell you about what is different about you, you'll be tempted to say, well, all chiropractors are doing that. Now, that doesn't matter if all chiropractors are doing it. It matters of whether or not you're communicating it, whether you're the first to market saying that this is exactly what we're doing, okay? That's the story of twice filtered beers. The other thing that you can think about with regards to trying to find your different is, what are the common problems that people have with chiropractors? What are the barriers, the uncertainties, the frustrations that people commonly have when they're thinking about chiropractic? And how can you solve those problems? How can you be the one that says, here's the issues that you typically have when you're talking about chiropractors, here's how we're different from that as well. Communicating that will help you stand out and will have you capture an enormous amount of attention. Now, I want you to think about this. Finding and communicating your difference is not necessarily something that will happen to you by the end of listening to this podcast episode. It might. For some of you, there might be that aha moment that has come to you now. You go, I know what it is, and we need to double down on communicating this. But the truth of the matter is it takes time, it takes effort, it takes research, and it takes deep thought. Okay, and that's a good thing, because this is the exact reason why most of chiropractors, most of the competitors, most of the businesses in your community absolutely won't be doing it, because it's hard work. And remember, the reason we do hard work is because of those patients, literally those thousands of patients that are within an hour's drive of your practice that are wanting you to stand out, to step up, to get out of your way, to stop the fear of rejection, humiliation, all those things, because they have a life that needs to be saved. I want to leave you with a question as we do finish all of this up. What if it wasn't being better that was going to get you to where you wanted to go? What if it was being different? What would you be prepared to do? Until next time, my friends, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I'll see you back here real soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.